Namaskar. So we are back again. We are back with another episode of Career Corner. As you are aware, every day we come out with one episode focusing on one career choice of young people in modern India in the new normal. These young people who select various domains, many of which were unavailable to us when we were in schools and colleges. There is a focused discussion on that domain by an expert of that subject. Today we have with us Professor Tanmoy Putatunda, the head of the Department of English in the School of Liberal Arts and Culture Studies in Adamas University, Kolkata. Welcome to the show, Tanmoy.
Thank you, sir.
We all know about learning languages. The first thing that we do when we are born, a child is born, is to start learning a language. Even before the other aspects of our cognitive mind are being prepared, language comes quite early. And as we go ahead, language evolves into the next phase, that is literature. We start with our mother tongue or the language whichever is spoken at home, and we move on to other languages as we grow up. English is no more a foreign language in India. It is a part of our living. It's a part of our education. Even for those who study in Indian language medium, English is still there. And higher education is the dominant language of higher education in the country. And English language and literature has a huge history. So we'll know about the history, the evolution, the various aspects, specialization areas, focus areas, functional aspects, functional impact on career, the right way to learn literature and language, and the right way to make use of that knowledge. All of these over the next 50 minutes from Professor Tanmoy Putatunda, Head of the Department, English Language and Literature, School of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, so Liberal Arts and Culture Studies, which was erstwhile Social Sciences, University of Adamas in Calcutta. So Professor Putatunda, the first question to you is, English language has a checkered history. If you could speak about the evolution of language and literature in English at the very apex, at the very beginning, how did it start, which were the major highlights, who were the major people? I mean, we all know about Shakespeare, but who were the major people who actually laid the foundation of English language and literature?
Thank you, sir, for that introduction. Yeah, I mean, that was a beautiful introduction to language, as sir was saying, because two things which are absolutely primary to human existence. Number one is, of course, the language. We want to communicate, and language is, it dates back to time immemorial. And the second part is the storytelling aspect of it. So even just when people learned how to shape language, how to communicate, they started telling their stories. Stories are not just for entertainment's sake. It talks about human experience. It makes us human, as it were. So English as a language also has a very old history, and it dates back to thousands of years. So but of course you need to remember that the language is a very dynamic medium. So it was not the way we know the language, this particular language English currently is. It was not like that before. So it underwent huge changes. So from the old English period to if we call it postmodern era, or some call it postmodern era. So the language has underwent heavy changes, and one of the reason why English has survived, and not just survived, it has thrived, and it has kind of now all over the world, is because its flexibility. It has adapted several words, several phrases, several expressions from other languages. So English as a language is extremely flexible. It has adopted, as I was saying, from several other languages, and of course it has now evolved it has grown to be a global lingua franca. something which he cannot do without. So yes, I mean the language, but along with the language, it has the literature has also evolved. It also has a very, very rich heritage, and as sir was saying, that it is no longer just confined to the British Island. So today now we don't call British literature, we call it world literature. So the nation, the national identity, the country no longer defines the boundary of a literature. It's now all over the place.
That's in general right. We
Yes.
are talking in context of specifically the evolution of English language and literature. So what would be the phases if you come to 21st century, before 21st century, last 20 years we'll discuss later, what will be the phases of English language and literature's evolution from the very starting of the language?
Okay.
And what are the distinctive features of each of these phases in brief?
Right. So to begin with, the first was which we call Old English period. So where and from Norman conquest in 1066, that is the era we know as Old English era. After that comes the Middle English era, and if you now read them, of course you possibly won't be won't be able to recognize, because several different expertise are required to understand the language. They are so different from today's language. After that, what we call the Renaissance, during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. Of course, the great Shakespeare wrote during this era, and not just Shakespeare, others like Marlowe, there are other writers who Sidney Spencers who wrote during this era. After that comes, of course, Dryden, Milton, Age of Pope, which is in the 18th century. Then comes the 19th century, where we have famous writers like Charles Dickens. Then of course comes the Romantic era. Wordsworth, we all know, we have all read their poems in schools, and of course afterwards. Then comes the Victorian era, when we have Charles Dickens. Then we have a modern era where we have Jane Austen, T.S. Eliot, and then of course we have postmodern era, which we are now living in. So of course we have and now of course it's the boundary, it has a kind of erased, as I was saying. So yeah, to put it succinctly, this is the short history and evolution of English language and literature.
Great. And how distinctly are the English literature's evolution different from the European experience and the American experience?
Okay, so of course it evolved in both these continents, to begin with. So it was not just confined with the European countries. England per se, when you talk, even now when we teach English literature, it's not just, as I was saying, it's not just British literature. It talks about it takes elements from other European countries as well, and like Germany, French literature, and there are other, as I said, other countries as well. So Euro and America, of course, as a language, even now when we use a computer, we have this American English and British English. So by their very nature, they are different once again, but also there are of course similarities. Most of the time they are similar, but if we talk about pronunciation, sometimes the spelling, sometimes the expression, they are different, and that the same is applicable not just about Europe or America, but in any part of the world. In India, for example, we now know about Indianism. So there are several expressions we use which are not there in other languages. For example, other countries. For example, we often say pass out. Now, pass out is not an expression which is there in the of course, it is there, but it just means that becoming unconscious. But here, sometimes we use it to denote denote graduating a particular year. So these are several nuances. This is just a few examples, but there are other nuances as well. And of course, as this discussion progresses, we'll know more about it.
Yeah. Now, we find that there are certain specialized domains in the context of English language and literature, those domains which are specific to specific areas. If you could explain those domains as well.
Right. So, okay. So to begin with, I think I will talk about two primary division of this discipline. One is language, and the second one would be literature. So language we all know, but there are some technical aspects of it, like linguistics, applied linguistics, philology, sociolinguistics, and then if we which is basically the study of language, how it has evolved, the structure of it. Secondly, if we come to literature, there are apart from, other than the all these ages that I have just talked about, there are other aspects like post-colonial literature, postmodern literature, popular literature, film and culture studies, visual arts. So all these disciplines, they come together, to form this entire gamut of literature. So literature is not just limited to, and there is this often this misconception that literature just means writing or reading about a story, a poem, but it's not just that. Even anything can be part of a literature. Even a city, for example, can be part of a literature, and even as a film can be a part of a literature. Anything that we can see, anything that we can experience can be a text, and hence subject to interpretation. So that what literature is.
Great. So these are various specialized domains that you look into. There are various aspects that we'll take up. So in your responses, if you could just limit to that aspect which is being asked, because there are many other things that will go ahead. How is the Indian expression of English literature different and distinct from the earlier British and the American ways? And what are the various trends and the people that you see in the Indian context?
Okay, of course, in India, English primarily came with the British, British rule. So when they came, they established, schools, colleges, and just because they needed some specific, individuals who could mediate between them, of course, and the colonized people. So the literature also, began at the same point. So Bankim Chandra Chatterjee was, he was the first one to write an Indian, a novel in Indian English. And after that, of course, the Sarojini Naidu and other the Rudot, so and Aurobindo Ghosh, and now of course in the present era we have we have Salman Rushdie, we have Amitabh Ghosh, Jhumpa Lahiri. So there are several literary figures to name, and Indian literature, of course, one of the primary facets in the beginning era was, of course, to search for an identity. Initially, it was modeled upon, British literature, European literature. Later on, it began to find identity of its own. And in the post-colonial era, especially after the independence, it has, evolved like anything. And even, the speech pattern, the grammatical, the structure, the expressions. For example, even if you read an English novel now, Indian English novel, you'll find words like, words possibly which were used in Hindi, in Bengali, like shari, for example. It is used, the word is used in the, an Indian English novel. So these have, as the language has evolved, so has the literature. And this search for this identity, of a distinct identity, that has led the contemporary Indian authors, and especially, as I said, after the independence, towards more direct, more specific kind of content. So this is now what we now know as Indian English literature, which is a huge discipline. Even if you look at the curricula, it also reflects the same. Increasingly, there are more about earlier it was just British literature. Now we have more about Indian English literature.
Great. Now, if you could also talk about the stalwarts of Indian origin. Now, I find there are two types of Indian driven English literature. One, those who are writing from Indian soil, and
Yes.
those who are writing as people of Indian origin or non-resident Indians from other countries. So, is there a difference between them, or who are the main people? If you could speak on that.
Right. So it's a very interesting question actually, because when you talk about Indian English literature, there is often this debate that what do we know by Indian. So whether somebody, as sir was saying, that whether someone who is in India and writing in English, or who is even outside India and writing in English, whether that can be called an Indian, that can come under this broad category of Indian English literature, or for that matter, somebody. And I'll just give an example. Like I am working on this urban, representation of the cities in contemporary Indian literature. So there is this author called Sam Miller, who is was actually a BBC correspondent, before. and he has been living in India for 10 years. So when he is writing about Delhi, do we call it Indian English literature?
Right.
Or somebody who is, say for example, Rana Dasgupta, who Amit Chowdhury, even for that matter, who lives for the most of the time they live outside, but then they came Suketu Mehta, for example, who wrote Maximum City.
Kunal Basu.
Right. Yeah. So this term Indian in the age of globalization is, it has increasingly become more and more difficult to interpret, difficult to define. So to define is to limit in that sense. So
while broadly it is right, but there are certain cultural roots of every writer,
yeah,
and the cultural roots reflect in their work as well.
Yes.
So from that perspective, a broad Indian English literature is there. I'm sure you agree to that.
Yes.
And that was a point of discussion. Okay. You have brought in a journalist becoming a writer, you know. So there is this new trend, particularly over the last 20 to 30 years, where a large number of non-literary writers, in that sense of not novelists, not poets, and not short story writers, they have come from various other fields. Journalism is one. People from management background, I mean there are quite a good number of people from management background, corporate background, who have come into writing full time, whether popular culture sort of writing or a little nuanced writing. And then we find people from legal background, law, also coming in. So to what extent do you find the writing of English literature in India evolved in this century, 21st century, from fiction and non-fiction writers? If you could speak on that.
Okay, so yes, I mean, as I was saying, that literature is possibly the more, it is the most interdisciplinary field, that is possible, because it talks about experience, and experience does not limit itself to the literary, those who study literature only. So a person from journalism, background of journalism or law or engineering for that matter, can of course write, and they do write, of course, and which can come under this purview of literature. So in recent years, as you were saying, this trend has become more and more palpable, because recently we can because I work on non-fictions, and I that's why I know that recently, non-fiction, the number of published works as non-fiction, this under the category of non-fiction, actually is more than fiction. So even the audience, the readers, they are looking toward this kind of writings which talks about diverse experience. And I think one of the beauty of literature is that it can bring within its ambit this experience of other fields. It is not just limited within as I was saying, it's not just about Wordsworth, it's not just about Shakespeare, but it's about everybody, it's about us. So it's about current time, and it's about all people that we know of. So that has significantly, of course, changed in recent years, as more and more people from different disciplines are writing their experiences.
Who would be the leading non-fiction writers in English literature in India?
Okay, one of the difficulty of saying leading is that because non-fiction is so varied, and to name a few would be possibly would be injustice to others, because there are so many writers. If you go to anywhere,
that will be true for every age and every genre of writing. But when we talk to youngsters, we have to put some examples before them.
Right.
That can be 3, 4, 5, and so that the youngsters, there are many, doesn't inspire a youngster.
Right.
There are these people who are writing quite a lot, and you better check out their writing, is an inspirational thing. So as an HOD, you are supposed to motivate youngsters. If you could tell who would be the people that they should be reading, non-fiction and fiction both in Indian context.
They can read Jhumpal Haidi, for example.
That's in fiction.
Fiction, and they can if you talk about non-fiction writer, they can of course talk about, as I was saying, Sam Miller's, Amit Chowdhury is there, Suketu Mehta is there, and so they are all there in this ambit.
Good. Literature is a reflection of society, that people say. To that extent, there is an influence of journalism there. But journalism often is also said literature in a hurry, or literature of the moment. Then there is the other aspect, that any random writing cannot be called literature. So conceptually, what qualifies as a piece of literature? How is it different from other forms of writing? There are other forms of creative writing, and then there are forms of journalistic writing. So how is literature distinct from them?
Okay, if you talk about present scenario, earlier it was there, this differentiation, this hierarchization. But now, by literature, we, inside the ambit of literature, we can bring in several stuff. So even the journalistic writing that we are talking about, that can come within literature. So and we in currently research, even any journalistic writing, any magazine can be a part of literary research. So nowadays we do not differentiate. If we talk about current trends in literature, we do not differentiate between these. Of course, there is this canonical literature like Renaissance, Victorian age, Romantic age, modern age. But there is also these other writings which also, especially if we talk about PhDs now, they are in this they are interdisciplinary in nature. So they no longer differentiate between literary writing or non-literary writings.
That makes it too broad and ambiguous. At the end of the day, for a learner, how does he understand this is a good piece of literature and is not, or this can be considered to be literary writing and this not? Is there any yardstick to understand that?
No. I think that would be the answer, because see, as I said, recently we talk about popular literature. So for example, a comics which was not considered as part of a literature before, now comes under of course literature. So even a film, even an ad film for that matter, that can also be subject matter of a study. So this
advertising copywriting, a commercial copywriting is a part of literature. Okay, in a broad sense, it's a writing, no doubt, creative writing, no doubt. But would you call it a literature in the real sense?
Literature, if you talk about English literature as a discipline, yes. Because nowadays we, I myself has wrote a few articles about this advertisement. Of course, we don't look at it from a same perspective as of course the media schools would do, but we have our own perspective. So we talk about the thematic perspectives. We talk about how this identity is getting built up. Okay, so how youngsters are trying to define themselves. So these, of course, now come under the I know it can be too overwhelming, too broad to talk about, but literature is essentially that, and even our curriculum that reflects that.
Now coming to the curriculum, now there is this whole challenge. You learn English language and literature from a very traditionalist perspective, as you have mentioned about the Victorian, the Romantic and the various other ages, or you learn it from a very functional perspective, how you use it in day-to-day life, how you use it for your professional career, whether as a copywriter or as a journalist or as a non-fiction writer or in whatever form. So how do you teach literature? Do you really can teach literature? Can it be taught? Is there something that comes from, is it internalized? Is it something that is a talent which is nourished by the writer himself or herself? Or learning literature and being a good writer are two different things. So if you could throw light on these areas.
Right. The creative aspect of it and of course the critical aspect of it, both are different, of course. We need different skill set, for both of them. In our curriculum, for example, of course we have this, what we are talking about, this canonical aspect of it. So we have this from Old English to postmodern era. We also have, there are some elective papers. So especially in the elective papers, we try to bring in all these aspects that I was trying to talk about so far. So, the popular literature, where we have even, Harry Potter is part of a literature, Asterix, Tintin, that can be also, read as a part of literature. We have film and culture studies where we study several films, or even advertisements for that matter, as I was saying. Those are there. So, of course, the curriculum here has been designed in such a way so that, we have, of course, this literary stuff of it, the language stuff of it, and of course, also, such optional papers where we can bring in the functional aspects of it. So, ELT for that matter, English language teaching is, of course, very vital these days, because we have this the demand of language trainers is huge these days. So we have papers on that. In fact, our university is possibly the only one which has ELT as a core paper, because we want to make this course more functional in nature in that sense. We also have linguistics. We also have creative writing as part of a paper. So the this course, both the undergraduate and the postgraduate course, they are designed in a way so that they cater to all the needs that a current learner needs. So they need, of course, this academic knowledge. They need to know about the canonical literature, as it were. They also need to be there, employable in the current market. So for that, they need to learn some skill set. So all these papers, all these courses that we talk about, they have been designed in a way so that they cater to the current need of the students.
Right. People say that literature should be studied less and lived more. It's through experience and shared experiences of those who are learning it, or in tune with the community around, that literature can be learned more. So what is the right approach or right pedagogy for literature learning?
Okay. So if you talk about pedagogy for that matter, as you were saying that literature possibly cannot be taught. So in classroom also we believe that. And in this era that we are all aware that it's more of a learner-centric approach rather than a teacher-centric approach. So all the English classrooms, and I repeat once again, all the English classrooms in this university, they believe in constructive approaches, and they are sites for constructive learning where learners generate new knowledges. So they themselves generate knowledge. So for example, suppose they are studying Elizabethan literature. They would perform the text, they would contemporize the text and perform it in the class. They would make poster presentation, they would make debates. So that is how they they can be more adept at they have this hand-on experiences, and not just a teacher articulating or saying all this stuff. Right. Teacher would be guiding, they would be facilitating, that is the term we now prefer. And the learner themselves, they will because today in the era of information, I think everything is there on internet, so we are not there to provide information.
So there are three approaches. You learn by doing, what you were saying close to that, experiential learning, learning by doing. Then you learn through a project. You take the project from end to end, from concept or conceiving the project till its market or societal delivery to the masses. So this entire project-based learning is a second learning. Then third, you learn on yourself, learn by yourself. And there the institute's job is to teach, or rather, if I can tell this way, to help in learning to learn. So ability to learn by oneself, self-learn, is an ability that is long-standing, because what we learn today is almost obsolete or dated tomorrow in a few years. Particularly in case of infrastructure or technology, is very true. May not be so much in literature context. So what are the applications of these three concepts in your context of pedagogy? You may not be using all the three, but what are the learning to learn, learning by project, and learning experientially?
Okay. So the experience, if I have understood your question correctly, so how we are implementing this, or
yeah, what are the things you implement to bring these three things, three aspects of learning or three routes of learning to your students, to your learners?
Right. So as I was saying, pedagogy wise, they of course read the text preferably at home, and of course they were given study materials or resources, and of course they come prepared, and then they engage themselves in several class activities, group activities, individual presentation and group presentation, which also increases their confidence, because that is something which is very important in all aspects of life. Next, of course, they make, as I was saying, the some collaborative activities, which of course make their learning in depth. So they have this in-depth learning, because when they also for example make video presentations. So when they are doing that, they're automatic. Whatever the knowledge is, that becomes clear.
Internalization of knowledge happens when
yes.
you express the same thing through various means. So whatever text I have learned, if I enact it, if I make a video out of it, if I make a poster out of it, if I do a podcast out of it, if I review it, the internalization of the learning from all aspects happens. So is that something that you are trying to say, that experientially is through this, right?
Exactly, sir.
Learning to learn, learning through project, any experiments on those areas?
Yes, learning through project means they sometimes make documentary like things. So for example, they have studied a subject, for example, Elizabethan fashion, for example. So those are once again connected to literature. So they make a project on that. Okay, so they make short films in the current circumstances, which once again supplements and complements their learning of the texts. So as I was saying, since literature is no longer limited to just texts or books, as it were, these projects help them into an immersive learning. So that kind of propels them to be towards a holistic learning.
I appreciate immersive learning, holistic learning, the right approach towards learning literature. So what are the various programs that you offer at undergraduate level, postgraduate level? What are the focus areas of these programs? How are they different or distinct from similar programs in other universities?
Okay, right now we have three programs, UG, of course, BA in English, PG in English, and PhD in English. If you talk about the curriculum at the undergraduate level, there are primarily two categories. Once again, they are not they are not distinct categories, but there are primarily two emphasis on the curriculum. One is for those students who are learning the language to secure employment. Secondly, there are students who want to pursue higher studies. So this undergraduate curriculum has been made keeping in mind both these types of students. So, and of course this curriculum is also, and this is applicable for both the UG and of course PG curriculum, both research oriented as well as career driven. So we wish to make a perfect blend where learners can come and they learn all the aspects. So whatever they do in future, they have no problem. And of course, in this curriculum, based, of course, we have following UGC guidelines, so we have all the necessary requirements for that. But also we include such papers which we I was just talking about a while ago, like ELT, linguistics, digital humanities, creative writing. All these aspects are there, so that they also learn a few skill sets which are necessary for current days. Nowadays we talk about, as we all know, that we have migrated, we have become in a school of liberal arts and culture studies. So we talk about 360-degree learning. So learning has become interdisciplinary in nature. So we are gone are those days when we are talking about specialization, specialized areas. So now we have to talk about several approaches which would kind of enable a learner, several disciplines, several subjects which would enable a learner to be employable in the market. So that is something, and we never know 5 years down the line what will happen. So all these papers, all these courses have been designed in such a way so that they can have an ample glimpse at it. Not just that, if you talk about the research aspect, they write dissertation both at UG and PG level. We have a paper on research methodology, so that they learn about how to do research in that paper. So both these aspects are taken care of.
Correct. So now that you speak about research, what is the research profile of the Department of English Language and Literature in the school?
Right. So we have 10 members, strong faculty here in the department, and of course all the faculty members, they are either they have either completed their doctoral degrees or on the verge of completion, and of course they contribute regularly to several journals, even for example Scopus indexed UGC approved journals, and we also have a project in the department which is called Porous City, which is in collaboration with the University of Miami. So and the beauty of the project is that it's not just the teachers but the students are involved in it. So from UG to PG, all the students, they come and they involved at it. So we also of course teachers will engage in research, but you also make sure that the students are also engaged in research, so that they're prepared from the basic level.
Great. You had mentioned once in a while when you were speaking, but if I have to ask you 3 USPs of the school, that these are the three standout elements of the School of Literature. And I find your department has a reasonable higher success rate as far as attracting young talent is concerned in the School of Liberal Arts and Cultural Studies. So what are the three distinctive features of the school, of the Department of English Literature?
So the first would be, of course, this curriculum. As I was saying, it's a blend of research and of course, career opportunities. I mean, courses which facilitate career opportunities. Those are there. Secondly, very motivated young faculty who can connect with the students, in a much more comprehensive way. Third would be the personal attention that is given to each and every student, because they are not. I mean, they are not just when the class is over. It's not just limited within the class. The interaction is not just limited within the class. Mentors are there who take care of each and every student regularly. They are in touch with their families as well, so that not just academic but even in non-academic issues, because those are important, because everything is connected. So that is once again a very, very important point. I would also like to add another point, which is pedagogy. For example, because we are also talking about this performance based and group activities. We also, for example, now after this COVID-19, we already have situation where we are promoting digital learning. Now, in our department, for example, we have been implementing this, for a couple of years now. So when this happened, it was easier for our students to adapt to this, new, what we call it as new normal. Right. So that is how, we want to, stay a step ahead, of others. So this
brings naturally to the question: what will be the impact of COVID on the learning, mentoring, and practice of literature going ahead? I believe writing has got a boost. Yeah. And from social media to online writing to publications, I mean, it's got a boost. So what do you think as the head of the department, the impact of COVID on overall language literature and specifically to your department?
It has definitely got a boost, and for example, now we are writing blogs and several experiences, and all these, as I was saying, all these come under this our areas of literature, and of course it is said that often the great literature is produced out of tough times. So it is of course tough times, and great writings are also coming up these days. In the years ahead, I think we don't know how long this situation will prevail, but this has significantly altered several of our practices, be it our reading practices, be it our living practices. So all these things have changed, and of course digital learning in our context, of course, more specifically, digital learning is possibly the way ahead, and it is not just because of the COVID-19, but I was saying in our department we have been promoting this for a couple of years now. No doubt COVID-19 has boosted it, and of course in future also we plan to implement this digital learning more comprehensively, so the learning won't be limited to the classrooms only. They can learn 24/7. That is possibly the biggest takeaway away from this situation.
Right. For those who would be joining the department in 2020, in studying of English language and literature, what will be your perspective for them? What sort of young people are you looking at? What sort of skill set and background? And what would you like to communicate to them at this time?
Okay. So first of all, we of course in literature is such a broad field, as I was mentioning. There is no, the only thing possibly that is required is, some creative aspect, and of course this, this urge to know, the urge to question everything. That is the basic, requisite if we are, trying to join a literature department. We are not just, you should not just accept everything unquestionably. You have to question, you have to ask what is the reason. So you have to study why is it happening, not take nothing for granted. That is the approach, ideally which should be before joining a department, a literature department. And of course, we believe that no student is a mediocre or a bad student. So everybody has, certain qualities. And literature is such a broad field that everybody gets a chance, to highlight, his or her own potential. So of course in our department, specifically we want to reach out to each and every individual student and identify their potential, and then we want to amplify that. So anybody, as I said, want to who love literature, who want to pursue in a want to and of course literature gives you, English more particularly, this discipline gives you possibly the widest possible employment opportunity.
Yes,
so
please explain that. What are the various types of jobs that you're passing out youngsters do? What various profiles they have, if you can talk on that.
Yeah. So the earlier, of course, people had this misconception that of course only teaching job is there, but now they are definitely there. Make no mistake. I mean, teaching still there are innumerable teaching jobs which are available. But besides that, we have employment opportunities in content writing and content developing. Both are different because content writing requires expertise in the written aspect of it, written aspect of the language. Content developer is someone who can shape that content. So for example, the publication houses, another field where these are necessary. This quality is necessary. Third would be media, because of course from the beginning, as we are all aware, English graduates, they get huge opportunities in media houses, be it newspaper, print, or audiovisual media. There are others, for example, like embassies. Embassies of several foreign countries, they recruit English graduates. They get a huge opportunities there. Language trainer. So it's a distinct field has emerged where, because English, the demand for English has only increased. Okay, so the demand for language trainer has also increased simultaneously. So that is another field. Advertising is another industry where we can look at. Creative writing is another industry. Digital humanities, which is, once again, I think I have not spoken about it much, but technology and literature, it has come together. And for example, you can get a job in a museum, you can job in a ASI, so everywhere, and of course the salaries, because when we are doing job, all of our expectation is, of course, that we will get high salaries. So even multinational companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, they all hire English graduates
developer.
For content developing.
Great. That's the overview for you. English language and literature, how it evolved from the British lands, the British society, moving on to American society and spreading across the globe, and how the Indian origin English literature has also evolved, and it has become completely merged now in the global context, as has been mentioned by Professor Tanmoy Putatunda, and also how the differentiation between literary and non-literary writing, so-called differentiation of the traditionalists, is getting obliterated in the current times, when various forms of writing are taking literary forms as well, are broadly considered as literary writing, and how literature cannot be technically quote-unquote taught, but experienced, learned experientially through a life experience, through peer learning, through shared learning, through projects, from end-to-end projects, and through self-learning. So this is something that's very true in the context of literature and language, whether it's English or any other language. The other aspect, COVID and post-COVID times, is seeing a spurt in writing, both online and offline, and a new form of writing, blogs and informal other forms of writing also coming up. So there's also a spurt in reading, and reading online and offline. And very interestingly, illustrations, video, audio and writing are coming together closer, and a new form of blended literature is also evolving. These are the new trends, and to understand these trends and to make a life of language and literature, one has to genuinely be sensitive, because literature reflects the society of the moment and also influences the society of this moment again. And as Professor Tanmoy has said, even career-wise, it's expanding its horizon from content development in digital companies, and he has used the word digital humanities, to working in media or advertisement or creative content writing, or in training, education and research. There is a huge scope, including diplomacy, non-government organizations, embassies and all that. So there is a huge scope, and an expert in English language and literature will never have to worry for livelihood, provided he or she has been true to the language and literature and its practice. So this was Professor Tanmoy Putatunda, Head of the Department of English, School of Liberal Arts and Cultural Studies of Adamas University, Kolkata, giving to you a rundown of English language and literature from times immemorial, from the British land to a global expression of the literature and the contemporary use, functional use and emotional use of language and literature. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Putatunda. We meet again with another expert, another subject. Namaskar.
Hey, welcome to Adamas. My research is on my way. I am very much proud to be a part of Adamas University.
Cricket is my passion and I am proud to be a part of Adamas University.
You have misused, I believe.
Hi, I'm Dept Vishwas.
This is Kunal Kanti Maiti.
I'm Srijoni Paul. This college has given me placement in one of the best companies in US staffing, which is Iconma. I am proud to be a part of Adamas University.
Pursue excellence. Adamas University.
Biosciences and technological developments based on biology, including entrepreneurship in this sector, are on the rise in India. We are home to many developments in all forms of biotechnological products with applications in food, nutrition, healthcare, packaging, etc. The unique BTech and BSc programs in Adamas School of Biosciences and Biotechnology are path-breaking academic innovation in this sector. Welcome to the world of biotechnology. As India aims for $5 trillion economy, the nation needs a large pool of trained economists and commerce graduates, focusing on taxation, macro and microeconomics, etc. Adamas School of Economics and Commerce is in the mission preparing finance and economics professional to lead this journey with value-added modules on the stock market and big data. Education today is changing the traditional chalk and talk method into new age experiential learning. New techniques like flipped classroom, case study method, and increasingly higher component of learning by doing are changing the game. Also, evaluation processes are evolving from just semester end exam to continuous evaluation, jury judge practical work, life projects, and whatnot. Adamas School of Education prepares these new age teachers for schools and colleges of India. It is important to be on the right side of the law and even more important to ensure justice for all. The Adamas School of Law and Justice firmly believes in this dictum. with moot courts, national and international seminars, debates and initiatives of various type, the law school offers integrated courses with BBA, BCom and BA as well, with different focus areas. A top-class hands-on engineering and technology education with high emphasis on soft skills, emotional intelligence, artificial intelligence learning, the Adamas School of Engineering and Technology is a trailblazing institute. It integrates learning in the classroom with laboratory, workshops, and the factories or the corporate offices. It is also associated with several universities in the world. With a 24-hour work culture, Adamas School of Management prepares professionals for marketing, human resources, finance, supply chain management, and pharmaceutical management for the new Indian economy targeting $5 trillion annually. Close association with several top corporate houses and intellectual talent in the classroom, the school is proud to have one of the highest placement records in East and the Northeast India. With a 2% share of the India's GDP, the media industry is growing faster than India's GDP. And with the world's largest number of films and television channels, it is the national informer and entertainer. With more than 1,000 films a year, cinema is our soft power. News, entertainment, brand communication, we lead Asia in all. And a multi-skilled multimedia talent is being trained in the Adamas School of Media and Communication.
ভালো রোজগার, কাজের স্বীকৃতি, স্বপ্নের চাকরি, এগুলোর জন্য কি শুধুই কঠোর পরিশ্রম যথেষ্ট? না, এটা পড়াশোনা এবং প্রফেশনাল ট্রেনিং এর একটা কম্বিনেশন। তাই যে এমন একটি কলেজ বা ইউনিভার্সিটি যেটা এই দুটোরই গ্যারান্টি দেয়, যেমন অ্যাডামাস ইউনিভার্সিটি। এখানে ছাত্ররা শুধু পরীক্ষায় দারুণ নম্বরই নয়, সঙ্গে পায় দুর্দান্ত প্লেসমেন্ট এবং কর্মজীবনের প্রয়োজনীয় দক্ষতা। তাই আজই নিজেকে রেজিস্টার করো অ্যাডামাস ইউনিভার্সিটির অ্যাডমিশন টেস্টে আর এগিয়ে যাও একটা উজ্জ্বল ভবিষ্যতের দিকে।